and live your life today. It doesn't matter what they say.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us again here on the Red Lotus Life YouTube channel, where we as spiral practitioners and womb spiral practitioner support visionary leaders who have experienced domestic violence and also just domestic violence survivors in creating a life that you love after abuse. We dive deeper into this work in the Red Lotus Life membership. It's $19.99 a month. It's a subscription in honor of Connor. We can talk more about that later at the end of this video. But for now, I really just wanted to unpack our boundary workshop that we just did. Right now, it is free for a limited time. You can go and check the playlist, and there's 3 weeks of boundaries where we totally talk about boundaries and how to set them and how to implement them. And then there's also an emotional clearing session at the end where we release conditioning around that as a collective here for the Red Lotus Life community. So we were originally going to just dive right into all different types of boundaries and all kinds of things, but there has been some integration here that Sarah Elizabeth and I have been experiencing. So I thought it was really important. We thought it was really important that we unpack this a little more for some of those. So for some of you who don't really know about this work and emotional clearing and exactly what we do as spiral practitioners. So in the boundary workshop, the clearing was around, it was pissed off. Pissed off was the emotional block. It was in the area of family love. So let's unpack this just a little bit. Pissed off is in the water element. We work with Chinese medicine and we work with the emotions chart in Chinese medicine, where the different emotions are in the water element, and also, well, different emotions are in different elements and then also in different organs. So this one particularly was in the area of family love, which of course, and it was also pissed off. It's in water, which is all about flow. Okay. And then it was in the bladder, which is pressure. So this is what we have been experiencing in our lives. And I know if we're experiencing this in our lives, you're experiencing it in yours as well. So let's just take a little bit of time here. So area of family love, that is all about literally family. And of course, we're talking domestic violence and domestic abuse in relationships, right? Domestic relationships specifically. So of course, it's in the area of family love. But what can happen as we start to integrate and implement boundaries so that we can create flow in our lives? What that does is it disrupts the flow in our family's life or in the people's lives that we have these family relationships with, right? And domestic can be anything. It can be intimate partners. It can be, it's anyone who is in the family. So this could even be like, let's say you don't have the intimate partner anymore. It could even be within the family unit of even your children. This is domestic. It doesn't matter if it's intimate relationships or not, but this has been fascinating for not only me, but also for Sarah Elizabeth, because what tends to happen is this pressure builds up, right? Like you disrupt the flow as you're starting to implement these boundaries. Then you disrupt the flow for the others around you, especially if they're living with you, creates this pressure of us standing in our power with this and really enforcing in a sovereign way. I don't want to really say enforcing, but it's implementing these boundaries. And then here comes the gaslighting. That's kind of what ends up coming around. And I like to talk about this because I didn't know what gaslighting was prior to me diving into this work. I mean, I had an idea of what it was, but whenever I was experiencing it myself, I didn't quite ever catch it. So I like to bring it up for others because this is common, I feel like, with domestic violence survivors. But there's this thing with the gaslighting where all of a sudden, if you're implementing boundaries, all of a sudden there starts to be this hey, but is this coming from you, or is this coming from your friends? Is this coming from your mentors? Is this coming from your therapist? Is this coming from your counselor? Like, who is this coming from? And then, I don't know, we kind of get told that we can't think for ourselves. A lot of times that's what ends up happening. We get told we can't think for ourselves, and it creates this whole self-doubt. So this is what we are experiencing now with this integration. What happens, I want to say, is that there's a lot of truth to this. And that's what we want to speak to today, is that there is truth to what we might be hearing about are we thinking for ourselves? And it really is using this discernment on what our outside influences, and then versus our inner guidance and what are we receiving. That's the part that is so important, is that we're not necessarily taking all of this advice and everything from the outside world and the outside influences. The important part is that we're listening, but is it in alignment with us? Is this how we truly would like to live our lives and create a life that we love? Or, I don't know, is the timing off? I mean, all kinds of things. I mean, there's so many examples we can use. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Sarah? And how has this been showing up for you? Because it's definitely been showing up for me after we've done this clear.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, wow. Big clear. It was much bigger than I had anticipated. Definitely am moving a lot for the collective, and it is showing up in my own reality in really, really big ways. As far as this insinuation that we can't think for ourselves and that we aren't using our own discernment, yeah, that pressure that you talk about, it's like, they press and press and press and press and press. And really and truly, the projections get made that maybe, someone outside of ourselves is controlling us, or someone is implanting these thoughts, or someone, for some reason, you or I, or, whatever the case may be, we aren't thinking for ourselves. We aren't believing in ourselves. We aren't pulling from our own wisdom. Even though, especially sitting here as spiral practitioners, even though we have done the work, we have been on this healing journey, the wisdom is there. We have done the research. We do have the tools that we need available to us in order to be able to implement and respond versus react. And so when that pressure starts to get put on us, then how do we shift? Where are we going to shift from there? So another thing that has come up for me during this integration has been like this massive release of sacred rage around where the boundaries were not maybe being upheld as much as I would have liked, both on my end and on, with other family members, so to speak. And so there's been this massive release in the liver meridian, which is one of the meridians that as practitioners we work with. And it's been so fascinating. It's just been so fascinating, but it's just this deep, sacred rage around just what those of us, not just the divine feminine, but any of us who have been in any kind of a situation that was abusive in any way, like just what we have had to go through on our healing journey in order to get to where we are now, and the amount of discernment that we actually have to use really on a daily basis in order to not be influenced. So,
yeah, I think that's so important, because I can tell you, prior to me doing this work, yeah, I wasn't using that discernment. And there were people in my ear, and they may have been giving me, well, there's plenty of time where I was taking advice and using it that wasn't in my highest and best. So when I say that there is truth to that, there is, and it's so important to actually use that discernment and go, yeah, but what's true for me? And what's true for how I want, and that's that empowered sovereign state, right, that you're talking about. And so when you were talking just now about the liver meridian and releasing, so in Chinese medicine, if anyone wants to know more about that, we go deeper into it in the membership. But it really is, when we're in the bladder and we're in the water, it's having that sovereignty there so that it doesn't come out sideways in that liver meridian, which is all about reactivity and change. So the liver's in the wood, which is all about expansion and growth, which, yes, this all makes sense that this is what's happening, because we did have that clear. So the wood element is the next element there. And that is, if we can bring it back and be in the sovereignty of the bladder and the water element and have that flow, then the reactivity and change of the intense emotions and the sacred rage in the liver doesn't come out sideways. Because it's really easy to have it build and build and build and build that pressure, right? As somebody's telling you, you can't think for yourself, or who's in your ear, or what's being said, how are you being influenced? And then going, no, actually it's me. It's me. I'm listening to my inner wisdom. I'm listening to my inner guidance. And this goes for the divine feminine and the divine masculine. This happens to every single gender, every gender out there. So it really is coming back to that place. So let me ask you this before we wrap up. How are you doing that? How are you staying in that sovereignty of not allowing these intense emotions that are in the liver meridian to come out sideways?
One of the ways I've been describing the intensity is like I'm in a pressure cooker, and as the pressure increases, it's almost like something has to give, something has to shift. Otherwise, you're just going to sort of explode, right? And so there's many ways. There are many ways that I'm moving the energy. Just allowing myself a safe space to be able to release. And that can look like screaming. That can look like stomping, haka. And that haka movement really reinforces the energetic boundaries when you are in an interaction with another being. Really, really just being the observer. That for me is huge. And I know as practitioners, generally speaking, being the observer is huge. And really being able to identify the patterns and how they're showing up over and over and over again. And then how do you shift that? I think sort of as practitioners, we are sort of gifted at identifying patterns. I know that is definitely one of my strong suits. And so it can be frustrating when you are able to see that pattern, and sort of those who you are trying to establish boundaries with aren't able to receive it.
Yeah, I love this part where you're talking about patterns, and just as spiral practitioners, one of the things that I think we've found, that we constantly say over and over again, as you do this work and you're releasing that emotional reaction, you don't really have much to respond to. So you really do shift into the state of observance. And that has been one of the biggest things for me, is really going, wow, I didn't realize how much I was constantly reacting. And in this situation, like what we're talking about here, it would be defending, right? Constantly defending, like my choices, my actions, my boundaries. It was constantly defending those. So I love that you bring that up. The other part too, one of the things that I've been shifting into and leaning into a lot as I live my human design. So for anyone who wants to know more about human design, this is another thing that we go into. We literally teach you how to live in your design. But there's a thing called inner authority that I absolutely love. I think we're both the same. We're both sacral
Yeah.
authority.
Mhm.
Yeah. Which is one of the easiest authorities to have. I'm really grateful for that because you literally ask yourself yes, no questions. And that's how you make decisions. Your inner authority is how you make decisions. So for me, we all have self-doubt. I mean, there's days when we're super empowered and we're very connected to who we are. And then there's other days that you may not feel as confident or have that high self-esteem and going, am I making the right decision? Is this really me, or am I listening to external influences and someone outside of myself? You can always go back, and for us being sacral responses, just ask yourself the yes, no questions, and you will get your answer just like this. So I don't know. Is there anything more that you wanted to add to that this week, Sarah?
I think the only other thing that I wanted to add is that just remembering again that we are not exempt. We are human beings. We do get to have emotions. And if you do find yourself in a state that is reactive instead of responsive, just look for the lesson in that. And how can you do something different the next time? What choice can be made the next time in order to hopefully have a different outcome?
Yeah, I love that. And if you're wanting to go deeper into the work, I invite you to join us in the Red Lotus Life membership. It's $19.99 a month in honor of Connor. We go way more into depth about all the ways that we are creating a life that we love, a life that lights us up. And we share so much more in that space. So we invite you to come and join us there. And then also join us for the next video where we're going to dive deeper into the different types of boundaries. This is huge. So many different types. And I love doing this work because you can't change what you don't know. But when we bring it into our awareness, then we're able to dive deeper into that and reflect, just as Sarah, you were talking about. Okay. See you next time.
Bye.
And live your life today.